How did Katie Holmes leave Tom Cruise and Scientology?
The actual part where she literally leaves seems to have been the easy part. I'm sure it took months and months and months of planning. I sort of relate it to, have you heard, I'm not going to change subjects, but just as a quick little aside, you familiar with the story of when Ron Miscavige Sr. escaped from Scientology's international management base?
No.
Okay, so I won't totally change the subject of the conversation, but he was David Miscavige's father, and he worked for decades at Scientology's secretive international management base. Well, he spent months and months and months figuring out the right time and the right way to leave and setting things up. But when it came time to actually leave, all he had to do was drive out the gate and turn left. It wasn't some big dramatic thing, right? And so you hear all you had to do was drive out the gate and turn left. That doesn't sound like much of an escape. But when you consider the months of meticulous planning in order to be able to just do that, that's why it's characterized as an escape. I think the same thing is true for Katie. She when it really came down to it, Tom was out of the country filming Oblivion in like Iceland or something, and she basically took Surrey, got on a plane, flew to New York, and said, I'm out of here. Like, it doesn't sound like an escape, but you have to understand how much planning in secret and hiding all of that planning from everyone in her life whose job it was to, watch everything she did and listen to everything she said and report on everything back to Tom and Dave and stuff like that. So I don't know if I dodged your question here or not.
No. And you know what? It leads me to another one. I guess before we get into how and the practicalities of it, let's paint an imaginary scenario based on your experience. And for anyone who doesn't know, Aaron was formerly in Scientology and has a very deep understanding of it and talks about it a lot on his channel growing up in Scientology. Let's paint an imaginary scenario where she hadn't prepared well and tried to leave. What happens then?
If someone catches her in the act, there would be an attempt to physically intervene. Now, I'm not talking about whacking her over the head and dragging her against her will back into a house or something. It would all be done from the perspective of helping her, not helping her, getting her to do what the people in her life perceive is what's best for her. So now if it really came down to it, there would be some physical interaction, like literally just standing in front of the car, not letting her open the car door, maybe gently placing their hands on her to slightly guide her away from the car while you're trying to have a conversation with her. Like it wouldn't be violent, but it would be physical. And in order for Katie to get out of that, she would have to escalate it to a more physical level to make it clear. This is not like, I mean, business. This isn't just, like Katie would have to be willing to escalate it to the physical or willing to call the police or, you know what I mean? If she were to have taken it to that level, I don't think anybody would have like, tried to abduct her or hold her against her will. I don't think it would have gotten to that level. But using physical force to keep someone from leaving a space is literally part of Scientology's auditor training regimen. When Scientology's training its auditors, there are specific drills on how to physically keep someone from leaving a space, because you're not allowed to let somebody leave an auditing session until it's reached its conclusion. I'm mentioning that because it's sort of part of the culture to be willing to put your hands on someone in a non-violent way, but in a way that is intended to control and restrain.
That's crazy. Did you learn that stuff?
Oh yeah, I was pretty good at it.
So let's say I was like in a conversation with you out at a bar. I go to visit you out in the US and I'm like, you know what, Aaron, I want to go home. I'm quite tired. What might you do to induce me to stay later into the evening?
It's no big special trick. It's really just a matter of being willing and comfortable to physically control someone. Most people just have no experience doing that. It's like anything. You practice it for a few dozen hours. It's no big deal to you. And that's what that's what it comes down to, is just, and I'm talking about the drills where people practice this. Remember, so let's say you're the one training to be an auditor, right? So you're the one trying to hone this skill. Your coach is very physically trying to prevent you from getting them to execute your commands. And I'm talking about like in an exaggerated fashion, like to like falling on the, like making you drag them from one wall to another wall, actively resisting and fighting you. The idea being that in an auditing session, you should never actually have to deal with this. But if you deal with it now, you won't be surprised by anything that comes up in an auditing session. So right. I'm talking about training people who are training as auditors practice physically manhandling people. I'm not exaggerating in any way, shape, or form.
And well, the other thing is that people forget, I think, because sometimes people will say, look, okay, they might touch her a bit and push her a bit, but she can get out if she wants and all that. And I guess what people forget is the human mind, like how people are. And I'm sure that no matter how much she wanted to leave Tom at that point, there's still that sadness. There was still that years together. There's still that uncertainty that everyone has. There's still the fact that Tom is her child's father, and that she's been part of this whole Scientology setup for a few years by this point. So it's very, very difficult once, so you do, I guess that's also why you have to prepare to make it easier to just leave.
Absolutely. Because I know sometimes you'll hear people refer to the fact that Katie had a quote unquote handler. That's not like a real word that exists in Scientology. There's just no actual word to describe what this person was. Jessica Feshbach is the one who gets referred to as Katie's handler. Well, Jessica Feshbach was Katie's auditor. So what I'm talking about, I'll call it a skill, whatever, of physically manhandling and controlling people, that's something Jessica Feshbach had spent dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of hours practicing. So it's not like Jessica would have had any back off or hesitation on preventing Katie from leaving a space or keeping her in a space or moving her to a different space. I can tell you, if Jessica had been present while Katie was trying to leave, Jessica would have figured out how to prevent that from happening without resorting to straight up physical violence. And again, it would have been over to Katie to be willing to escalate it to actual physical violence. And look, I don't really know Katie. You probably don't really know Katie. She doesn't strike me as someone willing to escalate it to that level. And so, but it also gives you a sense of how much planning would have gone into it prior to the fact to make sure it didn't get to that point.
Now, when we talk about leaving Scientology, are we talking about a physical place? Because I don't think she was living in like a Scientology building, was she? So what are we saying when we're saying it's almost like she has to sort of drive from one place to another? Now it's sort of I've left now. But what has she done?
Well, the thing is, every single person in her and Tom's life at that point would have been someone who worked for Scientology. Even if they weren't like literally a Scientology staff member, to be in a position of trust in the orbit of Tom Cruise, even if you're not officially a Scientology staff member, but you are a Scientologist, you still work for Scientology. Like part of your task is to report on everything, specifically to the people who work for David Miscavige, because David Miscavige has decided the top priority for Scientology is to make sure its most popular person is happy and well-serviced at all times. So physically, literally speaking, Katie wasn't living on Scientology premises. But I would almost, sort of jokingly, but sort of not jokingly, think of Tom Cruise's house as a Scientology premises.
Yeah.
Since everyone who works there is essentially a Scientology staff member. And and everyone there has a dual role of reporting on the goings on of the household to someone in Scientology.
Which is why, I was reading before that she got a second apartment, which I think she said she told Tom that it was to escape the paparazzi, but actually it was so that she could get away from all the people who were associated with him.
That is such a great story to use. I need an extra apartment to get away from the paparazzi.
Yeah. Because remember that time as well, it was just that you couldn't open a newspaper without her face and Siri's face and Suri's face and all these people. It was just constant. And that was like the Britney Spears time as well, the Leave Britney Alone time, the way the paparazzi were with celebrities, even more than now. So, that worked as an excuse. And I guess she had this separate place. I suppose yet another reason why she had to plan in advance all of this stuff that she was doing was custody of her child. Because I guess if she gave Scientology, who have very lawyered up, if she gave them a head start, they might have got going on it. And as it was actually a relatively simple leaving, and she got sole custody.
Absolutely. I think part of the planning would have been, again, it's kind of the exact same point that you're making here, getting her ducks in a row so that by the time she sent her demand letter, or I think her father was acting on her behalf as a divorce attorney, by the time they sent over whatever terms or demands, they had enough to back it up, enough ammunition to go public with, if need be, to convince Tom to settle damn near instantly. I think it was 11 days their divorce was settled. I've never heard of anything like that before.
I saw today that it was described as one of the greatest legal triumphs of the century, because people were shocked at how quick and how brilliantly done it was.
Considering it involved Tom Cruise and all of his money, and Scientology and potentially all of their money, I would agree with that characterization. I mean, 11 days, full custody. I mean, that's remarkable. And that means she had dirt. And not just dirt on Tom, dirt on David Miscavige, because Tom would do anything to protect David. To a degree, does Tom really care what the tabloids are saying about him? I mean, I've been saying all sorts of salacious things about him for decades, but you start putting David Miscavige in the crosshairs, that's a whole nother level.
Wow, that is such a crazy thought.
Yeah.
And I mean, another thing that crossed my mind when I read about this, like, she got sole custody, and I think people were surprised and stuff. But then from what I've learned, and you'll be able to give us a much greater insight into this, but from talking to Mike Rinder, was that there is a sense that your children are, am I right in saying, almost not your children? They're just other souls that are in other bodies.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, like, that's more of an academic position to take. Like, according to what Scientologists believe, that is academically true. I would stop short of saying Scientology parents do not have that natural emotional connections to their kids, but it is because that's natural, that's genetic. You can fight it, but it exists. And yet Scientology does whittle away at it to a point where you suppress any of that natural emotion. It's definitely a hallmark of Scientology, is suppressing emotion. And to the point where eventually a Scientologist would rationalize it away, that, well, like, Thetans don't give birth to Thetans, bodies give birth to bodies, and we're not our bodies anyway. So, I mean, just exactly what you said. Technically, your parents are only the parents of your body, not the parents of you. So, and you didn't, so what does it really matter? It really is. It's one of the biggest stories that doesn't get enough coverage, that, Tom Cruise has completely disowned his only biological child.
Yeah, I think he hasn't seen her since 2012. As far as we know, I mean, they must have different secret ways of seeing one another, and we wouldn't know about it, would we?
I mean, it's possible that we wouldn't know about it. I would just question, what is the value to secretly seeing your daughter and letting the world believe that you are not? It seems like if he was seeing her, he would want the world to know. And this brings up a really interesting, like, Scientological point. Tom Cruise is allowed to see his daughter, even according to the rules of Scientology, even if Katie Holmes is considered a suppressive person, because the law says that he can see her. And one of the precepts that Scientology follows when it's convenient is always follow the law. Now we know they don't always follow the law, but your average Scientologist would say that Scientologists are supposed to follow the law. And because the law gives you custody, you are allowed. Like, Tom Cruise would not get declared for seeing Suri, just because Suri is connected to Katie. And I'm going to take this one step further. I've said many times, and any other former Scientologist will tell you, it is possible to just quietly leave Scientology, never say anything bad about it, never speak to the press, don't publicly associate with other former Scientologists who speak to the press, and to not be declared a suppressive person. Technically speaking, Katie Holmes has not committed any suppressive acts. Leaving Tom Cruise is not a suppressive act. Leaving Scientology is not even a suppressive act. Publicly leaving Scientology is a suppressive act. And Katie Holmes has never said one word about Scientology. Do you see what I'm saying?
Wouldn't it be great if she did?
Oh, it would be great, but I'm sure she has. I'm sure she has contracts in place that give her lots of reasons to stay quiet about Scientology.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I would just, I'd go back to what you said about this natural instinct we have as mothers and fathers of children. And it's something since I started doing my podcast the last 2.5 years, I've started to doubt that. And I've started to wonder if that's sort of a Western invention or like a Disney version of who we are, because there are just so many examples throughout the years in cults, religions, but also just, China's one child's whatever, where they drowned girls because they wanted to have a boy, and it wasn't just China. That's happened around the world. I think of Hasidic Judaism. I think of extreme Islam. I think of the Moonies as well. I was interviewing someone from the Moonies who's a defector and just talked about how the parents use the kids to get into heaven. Like the kids are their ticket to heaven, and they're just seen as these like vehicles to be used to get into heaven. So I just wonder that. And obviously Mike Rinders he talked about losing a child, very young child at that time, I think it was, and sort of just reasoning in his mind like, okay, well, it was just a thetan or whatever. And I do wonder, maybe, and I also wonder, and I'm going off point a little bit here, if that puts a lot of pressure on parents nowadays when they have a newborn to feel that instant love because you're told it's natural, and maybe it isn't, maybe it's learned,
That's I see your point. I see your point. I guess I didn't necessarily mean automatic, instant something. I meant more like, I'm talking about the point where you have over time created a particular, I guess there's parents who just never have a good relationship with their kids. I guess there's parents who hate their kids from the moment, resent everything about it. Yeah. I guess here's what I was trying to stop short of saying. I don't want to create the impression that Scientologists, because they're Scientologists, don't actually care about their kids, because that's just not true. Mm-hmm. And yet if they were put in a situation where they had to disconnect, they may be heartbroken, but they will rationalize it away anyway to minimize to make it okay and to minimize it. That's all I really meant. But yeah. I think you raise valid points there.
And yeah, I wouldn't want to say it's just Scientologists. I think that could be all of us, and I think that just shows us that most of us can, like, rationalization or philosophy or ideology trumps love in some cases, and that's quite a sad indictment of the human race.
Yeah.
Oh, well, what can you do? So we don't love our children, don't love our parents, and don't feel bad if you don't love your parents or children. No, but, I'm joking, of course, a bit. But so back on to Katie. So she got her own apartment in New York. She had to fire her driver and several other people who were involved with Cruise as well. And then what happened next? Because I think you were saying before he was in Iceland. He was like totally shocked from what I heard, even though things weren't going that well between them.
Yeah, for him to be totally shocked, to me, kind of betrays sort of a typical naivete that exists in Scientology, that everything is always great all the time and should only be expected to keep being that great. Or maybe Tom has just such a warped opinion of what normal is that he doesn't realize how close his normal is to devastation.
Oh yeah. We're just getting some of the, I don't know if it's quotes we have from Nazanin Boniadi, the woman who was chosen for him before Katie, but I think there was an article I read where she was forced to like clean bathrooms with a toothbrush because she said congratulations to him because he got awarded at some sort of big award and said congratulations. Go on.
She said very well done.
Okay, what's the difference?
That's a Scientology phrase that you would only use. It's complimentary, but there's also sort of an implied condescension. I mean,
Oh
like,
my God.
very well done is like something a parent would, like, you're giving approval. It's, you would say it to a junior or even a colleague. You wouldn't say it to a superior. Very well done. It's like, who are you to tell me it's very well done? Like that.
Okay.
I don't mean to overplay this hand, but I remember specifically when I heard this story, it was like, yeah, that's a weird thing to say to either Tom Cruise or very well done. It's like, very well done.
Why did she say it?
You know, it's something Scientologists will say to each other. Like, I don't mean, it's not an insult. It's almost like, I don't know if I'm doing a good job explaining it. It's a very common thing for Scientologists to say to each other. In an auditing session, you know, an auditor writes up his auditor's notes and submits the folder to the case supervisor, whose job it is to determine whether that auditing session was done correctly or not. If it was done correctly, it's well done. If it was done very correctly, it's very well done. So I'm saying it's a phrase that exists in the technical lexicon of Scientology. It's not a negative phrase. It's just not the kind of thing you would say to someone superior to you. And all I'm saying is Tom Cruise and David Miscavige are so freaking sensitive to any slightest hint of disrespect. I can see them going, very well done. She doesn't understand her place. Because I can tell you, no other Scientologist would take offense at being said very well done. Only these two prima donnas would take offense at being told very well done. And yet the first time I read this story, as soon as I read it, I was like, yeah, that's a little awkward considering it's Tom Cruise. Very well done.
Lunatics, absolute lunatic. So that's the kind of thing that obviously Katie was having to imagine, that kind of thing, because that is a type of person as well. You know, I guess a narcissist, a very sensitive narcissist. You get it in men and women, of course, and you get it in relationships outside of Scientology. You get those kinds of people. You know, what did you say to me? What did you just say? And then the person, no, I didn't mean it that way. And then it's like a whole thing, and they're using their power, and they're playing like they're the one who are the victims in this. And I wonder just how much of that Katie would have had to put up with over the years. Did she become a Scientologist?
She did. But Andrew, realize not only how much did she have to put up with that from Tom Cruise, but David Miscavige was a regular presence with the two of them. Andrew, when I was in the Sea Org in Los Angeles and David Miscavige, God forbid, would come through and do a walkthrough, there would be a trail of destruction in his wake for things as minor as who didn't stand up immediately when he walked into the room. Oh. I'm not shitting you. The ethics officers would be running around behind him, pulling people out who had not stood up fast enough and pulling them into metered ethics interviews to find out what their crimes are. And here's where it gets really bad. We're talking about older, infirm people who couldn't have easily stood up without effort. Like he would go down into the basement offices where they hide the people who are unhealthy and have them do work in offices so they're not like publicly interacting with people, right? And so he would go down into the basement and walk through these offices where you have maybe a 65-year-old woman who's 60 pounds overweight and has braces on her knees. I'm thinking of a very specific person because this is a very real example. And he walks in and she turns around and she's like, hello, sir. So good to see you and everything. She's perfectly respectful, but she didn't stand up. And so she got removed from post and assigned to manual labor while she figured out, while the ethics officers worked to figure out what her crimes were. So we've spoken a lot about how Tom Cruise has over the years become more and more and more like David Miscavige. These are two little peas in a very little pod. And so seriously, it cannot be overstated what a freaking hellhole Katie's experience would have been dealing with both of these maniacs.
Man, the whole thing is just so crazy. What a crazy man. And then it makes me wonder, I'll just say quickly, that, and you can answer to this as well, because the two, Nazanin Boniadi was not a well-known actress at the time. Still isn't that well-known, but she's been in quite a few things now. Katie Holmes, and I think of Penelope Cruz, Nicole Kidman, these were like big stars would they have been expected to like clean the bathroom with a toothbrush?
I'm gonna stop short of that one.
Yeah.
You don't see public Scientologists forced to do that kind of stuff. I don't know that I could think of an example of a public Scientologist having to do that kind of a penalty. That's reserved for staff members and Sea Org members.
Well, Leah Remini was sort of told off, wasn't she, when she asked things about where Shelley Miscavige was? You know, she was sort of put in her place, and she was a public Scientologist.
Absolutely.
But she left as a result of it.
Yeah. And she was, you know, she was treated horribly for several months down here in Clearwater, but I don't think she scrubbed any bathrooms. If she did, I don't remember reading about that. But I find it kind of interesting that they eventually did select Katie for, you know, the Marrying Tom project instead of another Scientologist. I truly believe if they had selected a Scientologist who didn't have resources outside of the Scientology network, like Katie did, for example, just in her dad as a you know, pretty powerful divorce attorney, they would have had much more control over that person.
Yeah. Someone from the inside. That was the idea, wasn't it? And that's why Nazanin Boniadi was selected. And I suppose there was no one else quite right. I don't know. I imagine Leah was never asked. And it had to be somebody particularly beautiful and particularly fantastic and wonderful. And by all accounts, Nazanin was. But maybe they couldn't find another person befitting of Mr. Cruz in Scientology.
Yeah. I think they were doing two things at the same time. They were basically doing this audition process that was an all-encompassing thing that included non-Scientologists and actresses as well. And at the same time, they were trying to find, you know, the hottest Scientology girl or whatever, actress or model, that they could include in the process. Do you know what I mean?
The whole thing's totally mad. I just think some extra info I got just from looking it all up before, by the way, just for people interested, that Katie's dad is Martin Joseph Holmes Sr., the attorney, divorce attorney who helped her get that divorce in a record 10 or 11 days. And he was somebody who played basketball and practices matrimonial law. And also, I was reading that she created an inner circle of people she trusted that excluded Cruz. She used a burner phone to speak with her New York-based lawyers without Cruz getting a head start. Meanwhile, she was using a Scientology trick against him, love bombing him. So she was just telling him lots of nice things, love you, love you, love you, to Tom Cruise, and so that he wouldn't catch on. But meanwhile, she was in her second apartment, called him in Iceland, as we were saying before. He was about to do a stunt and had to get off his motorcycle to take the call, and he admitted to a German network that he hadn't expected it at all. He said, "Life is a tragicomedy. You need to have a sense of humor. I had an unbelievable amount of time to think about it." So, and even that call she made from a burner device that her friend had given her, she had to get rid of it all. I mean, it's just mad, the levels, isn't it, that she had to go to for him to not realize, and you know.
Absolutely. And there's some more that we can talk about, you know, the Surrey cruise and stuff after we make the jump.
Yeah, well, that's it, everyone. We're going to make that jump. So make sure, please do hit like on this if you haven't done it already. Leave a like on your way out. When I end this, you should be auto-directed to Growing Up in Scientology, which is Erin Smith-Levin's wonderful channel. If for whatever reason it doesn't work, just go over to Growing Up in Scientology and go to the live part, and you will find us talking in just a couple of minutes. So see you all there.